Coffee. We are obsessed about making the most delicious cup possible. We seek out the best beans, we buy top quality machines, all for that rare and perfect cup. There are so many factors in a beautiful cup of coffee. It starts with the bean, it moves on to how we roast it, how we grind it, and how we brew it. But there is a secret. How clean is your coffee machine? Every time you make a cup of coffee, it leaves behind an oily residue. That residue can turn bitter and coat the inside of your machine. The key to a great cup of coffee is to remove that residue and start fresh, so every cup can taste its best. At Ernex, we've been perfecting that one idea for over 75 years. From my great-grandfather delivering our first coffee urn cleaner to our high-tech quality testing in our labs of today. Our broad portfolio of quality products are designed for the full spectrum of coffee preparation techniques. We're also proud to offer Puro, professional cleaning products for the discerning barista, and Full Circle, the first environmentally responsible and effective portfolio of coffee equipment and cleaning products. We are so proud to have recently moved to our new facility here in Elmsford, New York. Everything's been designed for precision, efficiency, and quality. Right here is where we produce and manufacture everything that we ship to our customers and partners in over 65 countries around the world. In our brew lab, we test our products daily on everything from traditionals to fully automatics, fine-tuning for every conceivable variation. Here at Ernex, you'll find a passionate team of engineers, manufacturers, designers, and coffee lovers, striving every day to ensure that every cup tastes its best. Now, you know our secret. We work hard to help you make better tasting coffee.
So, welcome to the WCE, which is World Coffee Events World Barista Championship All-Stars. This is Peter Giuliano to my far left, your right, from the SCAA. He's the director of Symposium and my good friend.
That's right.
I am Stephen Layton. I'm from Has Been Coffee in the UK. And we're joined by a fellow UK English kind of friend. Go with friend. James Hoffmann from Square Mile Coffee Roasters in London. Please, round of applause.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. So James, we've got a few minutes to talk here as we, between events and coffee preparation and everything. Of course, we're in the midst of this, the giant Post Milano food and food equipment and restaurant show, and it's pretty spectacular. Just before we started here, we were talking, we were looking through this espresso supply catalog and talking about how in our early days as baristas, how exciting it was to look through catalogs like this, look at coffee equipment, try to put together your gear for coffee preparation. Of course, equipment for the barista is like a totally important part. I was talking with Francesco Sanapo yesterday, and we were talking about how the early term for what we now call a barista in Italy was actually macchinista, which is like machine operator. So this, being a barista is about interfacing between a man and a machine.
Yeah.
And you've gotten very involved in equipment and design and things over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I guess my background in coffee for a long time was working for equipment companies. That's how I kind of came into coffee. Working for Gadget at the start and then the Spaziale in the UK, and it was my my introduction to coffee was through equipment, and that just meant I had to have a kind of technical understanding of things. It was just part of the job every day. If that's your product, as much as coffee was the product.
Is that the thing that attracted you to coffee in the first place?
No, I got weird about coffee. I got weird about coffee because I read a book. So I bounced from job to job to job, and whatever job I've generally had, for whatever reason, I kind of like to get into it.
Right.
So when I worked in a casino, for example, as a croupier, as a dealer, like I got really...
You worked as you and I have a gambling background. I used to work at a horse race track.
Oh, nice.
Yes, continue.
I don't know who had more terrifying customers.
Yeah.
But no, I got really, I would read up on like card sharking and like how to cheat better, just to kind of, it was interesting. So I got into it. And then coffee, I kind of felt, I didn't like coffee when I started working in coffee. I just needed a job.
So wait, there was a book involved though? You read a book?
Yeah. So like the first book that you could, in the UK, there's not a lot you can buy in the bookstore that's on coffee, but there was one book that you could buy. It wasn't very expensive. It was by a food writer called Stuart Lee Allen, and it was called The Devil's Cup.
Oh sure, of course.
Which is a book that every time I recommend it, I'm like, read it, but don't read the last chapter.
Yeah.
Yes. Because you'll be like, oh, you'll feel sad. And read, I mean, everyone who buys it reads the last chapter and says, I wish I hadn't read the last chapter.
Right.
You're like, yeah, I know, but you're going to read the last chapter. But
that's how I feel about Dickens, by the way.
Really?
You should never read the last chapter, because he winds everything up and he ties all the bows and it makes everything good. So I just leave off the last chapter, but go ahead.
That's probably a better way. I can't do the Dickens. But anyway, no, he writes about coffee in a way that it's maybe a little biased, but it puts coffee at the center of almost every culture in an interesting way. You know? And for my own culture, you know, it was interesting to see a beverage have such an enormous impact on politics, culture, literature, sticking flags in other people's countries. Like, you know, we were this drunk nation, technically, you know, like 5-6 liters of beer a day was pretty normal, and then we get coffee, we wake up and we get argumentative, and then we start looking outside of our little island, and then it all gets a bit weird, and then we find tea, and then it all comes crumbling down for the coffee people. But I just didn't know it was that big. Like, I didn't drink coffee, and there's this peripheral, muddy, bitter pain that people went through in the mornings. And then it wasn't. It was this interesting thing that was everywhere. And that interested me, and it just pulled me in deeper. And then I got kind of lucky that I had a job that put me in a space that was kind of a cafe, that the coffee was free. I don't get too much of that. Like, I had like a 2-group and stuff, and I could make all the coffee I wanted. And then I was there like 50 hours a week, and then I had a broadband connection in the corner, and not a lot to do. So like, I just got weird.
Wow.
Yeah, it was like a freak sort of moment. And I could go, and I kind of taught myself latte art. This is before YouTube, because there was no YouTube then. So like, you could download, instead of stream, obviously, you could download these enormous files, and it would be like
I remember that.
Sammy and Vince Piccolo, like pouring one Rosetta. And I didn't understand that these like 20-ounce cups. And I was like, how do they get so many leaves in? I had little 5-ounce cappuccino cups because I'm working for an Italian company. How do you do it? So I taught myself latte art from the internet. And then like I would, you know, there was like a video of Tim doing the Stockfless move. Tim Wendelboe.
I remember that. I remember that video
too.
too.
We do now, right? And so I kind of learned coffee to some extent on the internet, which is why I think I've kind of remained involved online in whatever format for quite a long time since, because that was really my kind of way in.
That's interesting to think of you. You might be the first sort of, you know, WBC champion in terms of being connected via the internet. I mean,
well, I think it's kind of interesting that when you won in 2007, that was like the one where the stream became very important, because it was in Japan, and you know, Europe and America, that you know have been the big supporters and growers of the competition, couldn't easily get there. I mean, you were the first kind of internet champion in that way too. It's a good segue into talking about your blog. So www.jim7.com.
Yes.
I do a lot of traveling, and everywhere I go, a conversation tends to come round to you because I'm from the UK, and everybody says, I love James's blog. It's like, it's the resource that I go to. It's what got me into coffee. It's such a common thing to hear. Why do you think people have embraced your blog more than any other kind of format that's been out there?
I don't know if I can say more than.
I think so. I think it's definitely one. Like when people talk about coffee blogs, yours is the first one that gets mentioned, and then there's other people's.
But I think it's, I've cheated my way to some extent because I'm the only one who's really been writing consistently for, I think, 9 years that blog's been up now.
Wow.
This is a while, right?
Yeah, it's a long time.
It was like October 2004 I started kind of writing because I'd hit a wall and I was like, I'm going to learn. And the point of the blog at that point was like, in my day-to-day life, I'm stuck and I can't learn very easily. So I'm going to try and learn, and then whatever I do learn actively and go and find, I'm going to put on the internet so that people can learn too. And back then there were a few coffee blogs that were quite inspiring for me, and I wanted to be part of the club.
Right.
And it was like Tony Konechny, like Tonks
Right,
back then, and Chris Tacey's blog, Godshot, and a few other people. So I wanted to be part of that.
Right.
And I think it's just, I've tried very hard to not make it about my business, whether I worked for someone else or worked for myself. Like, I didn't really want it to be about that, and it still remained a fairly personal diary of whatever I'm going through in coffee at any
Absolutely,
particular
right.
time. And I think it's I don't know, there's no one seems, well, not many people, I'll say that, have kept writing. And I think for a while, like 5 years ago, there was a lot of writing about coffee on blogs, and some say, oh, Twitter broke everything, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Lots of blogs come and go, and I think consistency is key in all of
Yeah.
these things. I think just being there and being constant and trying to be honest and just leave sort of stuff out there.
Yeah.
It's searchable, and like the internet makes finding stuff easy now.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's good.
Well, we all three have some presence on the internet. Yours is voluminous, of course, and
Loud,
and
I think
which
it
is which is amazing, And I mean, I know that my own experience has been every time I kind of think about blogging more, I think, well, blogging's dead. I read some article in Wired magazine or something where someone declares the end of blogging, but then it doesn't end. I mean, and it reinvents itself, and and I always think of people like you were in those early days you describe, being able to sit down at a computer and wanting to learn so much about coffee and have those resources available to them. I mean, I think your blog has been a tremendous resource, especially as people want to go past technique into analysis or understanding, perhaps, is the way.
I think much more than blogging dying, blogging's evolved.
Right.
It's kind of like some blogs disappeared that it was good, they disappeared and they stopped because they weren't necessarily constructive. The ones that were good and got lots of readers carried on. And I think also video, YouTube, that the invention of YouTube changed a lot.
Sure.
We can find things like Symposium
Right.
online now, which kind of takes away that, fills a little bit of that blogging space and has just developed into something different, I think. I want to talk a little bit about London, because we talked about it yesterday, didn't we, with Sonia,
Right.
about how London kind of changed a little bit in 2006, 2007, from having 2 or 3 destination cafes to being this very vibrant kind of lots and lots of more like coffee shops and you could go and visit place. And we were talking about how Square Mile had an influence on that. What do you think was a driving factor, as well as Square Mile being there, for this spark that seemed to happen, and then coffee taking off in London?
I think London is one of the few cities where you can get this near perfect storm, because first and foremost, I can't pretend that stuff like population density doesn't matter.
Right.
Like in London, there is twice the population of Norway. There is twice the population of New Zealand in this one city. New Zealand can support, what, I think 260 coffee roasting companies
Right.
in New Zealand. So in theory, London could support 520.
Right.
So that, and the fact that it's and has been for a long time, a giant mixing pot and a a place that people pass through and spend time in. So we get to steal and have impact from many different cultures in one place. And it's not the most multicultural city by any stretch, but the Antipodean influence was undeniable in pushing things forward. And I think what we were trying to do at the time was, we had come from a place where we were part of a community, and that was a global community of coffee. Like we've known each other for years, because there's
Over
a global
decade.
community.
Yeah.
But yet we would come back to London and there was no community. So there was an active effort to foster that, and I think it was a great time because there were a lot of passionate people who managed to connect and kind of come together. And I think the problem with being a lone, passionate person is that regardless of how right you are about your product, if you're the lone voice, you're a dissenting voice, and potentially you're a crazy voice.
Right.
You know what I mean? So for years and years and years, if you're the one person saying, no, all of that coffee is really bad and this is really good, you're
Right.
like, yeah. It's the crazy guy, right? But what we began to have was like a coherent group of people.
Yeah.
10, 20, 30, 40 different people who would talk to the press, be it local, like Time Out or that kind of stuff,
Right.
or national, and there would be this coherent message and a coherent movement towards quality that I think also accelerated things. So it began to generate press. And where it really applies leverage, what's interesting to me is when you start to impact the base expectation. You know what I mean? It's not the top end of stuff, it's the base expectation.
Right.
And I think undeniably in London, the base expectation for coffee has come up, and that means lots of businesses that previously didn't really care because there was no pressure to care,
Right.
are now aware that coffee's a thing that should at least be good.
Right.
So reluctantly or not, they have to make an effort there. Whereas
Right.
before, in restaurants, in many cafes, the coffee product was bottom of the shopping list. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I spend all the money on the food, and then whatever's left, I'll spend on coffee. And if
Right.
I can make that cheaper, that would be great.
Right.
And now they're like, oh, I can't do that because everyone wants good coffee. This is such a frustration.
Right.
So
Yeah.
It's kind of that rising tide carries all boats thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love using that analogy. Like I've seen it in cities around the UK as well. You know, like Liverpool, a city where there was no great coffee. All of a sudden, there's 4 or 5 great places,
Right.
and now the other guys are starting to go, oh.
So I have to care now.
Yeah, we
huh?
should do something with that too.
Right.
And that
and
was
now-
kind of the proliferation from London too. That it actually spread outside of London into other parts of the UK. And we've seen it in places like Edinburgh, Leeds, Manchester, Liverpool.
Bristol.
Yeah, it's
You're talking about transformation, and you have sort of this reputation externally for being a kind of a coffee futurist, or at least a progressive element. This idea of transforming, say, London's coffee scene and pushing it forward, making some advances and stuff. But one thing that I think that's interesting about the company and the things you've done is there's an element of tradition there. You call your roastery Square Mile Coffee, which is a traditional way to talk about London. Definitely London-centric, right? The Griffin and everything. You named one of your coffee shop experiences Penny University, which is definitely a backwards-looking idea. Coffee has a long history in London. I'm wondering how you see yourself fitting into this long tradition, hundreds of years tradition of coffee in London.
Well, I think one, you're taught from school, and it seems wise to pay attention that history repeats, and it's worth paying attention to the past, regardless of where
Right.
you want to go.
Right.
And I could see that, and I'll come back to this in a second, as a fairly terrifying thing for London in some respects. But like, I got to travel a lot, and I got to see other cultures. And you would go to places with distinct coffee cultures. Scandinavian coffee culture is a distinct thing. The American coffee culture, in many ways, is a distinct thing.
Absolutely, yeah.
The Australian one or New Zealand one is distinct again. And there really wasn't, or there isn't currently, a distinct English or London coffee culture. But there used to be.
Right.
And that was the kind of interesting thing, that for a while we were the most interesting coffee culture in the world. Actually, for decades, we had this amazing coffee-driven culture.
Yeah. One of the first coffee houses in the US was called the London Coffee House, for that reason, yeah.
We kind of did the coffee house thing.
Right.
And I wanted on a kind of big philosophical level, London to get to a point where it had a distinct and discernible coffee experience. And I don't know if we're just still too much of the kind of mongrel nation that we want to take a little bit from everything and not really have a distinct separate thing, the way that Scandinavia wants to be Scandinavian.
Right.
You know, however that is. But yeah, and like looking back, there were things that I wanted as part of that. And Penny University was, you know, it's a beautiful ideal, the idea that you pay a penny to get into the coffee house, and it was egalitarian. There was no, we're a class-driven society still, let's not pretend otherwise, and there was no class there was no status, there was just conversation.
Right.
And, you know, the kind of the Wi-Fi third place office thing that we all rail against, because you go to, and again, let's say San Francisco, for example, and you walk into a cafe, and there's lots of tables for two with one person on a laptop and headphones, and that's the room of people clacking and interacting with other people digitally, but not having a
personally,
chat and a cup of coffee. And I was like, I would like people to talk to each other. So we built a bar where people would just talk to each other, and that was fun. But at the same time, you know, London's had three booms, let's say three booms. The 1652 onwards, let's say, 1950s, espresso hit, we went crazy for espresso.
That's
that
right,
was huge, big business.
Yeah.
Coffee exploded in London, and 10 years later was gone. And we have never had a precedent of a long-lasting coffee culture. Never. There's no reason in history to look back and say, this boom that we're in now is here to stay.
Right.
There is no precedent whatsoever. In fact, there is precedent for the opposite. So I do want, you know, I can easily formulate a scenario where London's coffee explosion contracts again. I can see it comfortably happening, and it won't retract as far as it was.
Sure.
But I don't think there's a given permanence that sometimes I think we kind of rely upon.
Right.
So.
Right, that's very interesting.
I think we can kind of see a little bit of that. It developed to a point, and it hasn't really moved a lot in recent years.
No.
You know, we're eking. We had this boom, and then we had this eke, where it just slowly stretches forward.
But you could argue that if you imagine coffee quality in London was here and here,
oh yes,
we had a boom, and then maybe what we're seeing now is the bottom catching up.
Yes.
Right.
And if that band narrows in the next 5 years further, that'd be great, because maybe then there'll be an opportunity for someone else to come in, innovate, push that top up, and again, we creep the bottom end up behind it. Maybe that's just fanciful, but you know, I do feel like the bottom end of coffee is creeping up. And I feel like finally quality coffee is starting to break away and become a little bit more distinct from either the kind of mass-produced quick service restaurant style, cheap but fine brand-driven coffee thing.
Right.
Is that fair?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which it's still pretty confused. You know what I mean? I don't think it's strongly different yet, but I think we're starting to see some breakaway in the idea that there's good coffee or there's everywhere coffee.
Right.
Do you think that's confused, though, because we kind of say the same things as those guys? We don't necessarily say unique things, and also we don't necessarily express ourselves well as a specialty community.
Yeah, we're bad communicators.
We're good at talking to each other. I think in our sounding board kind of talking to each other, we're really good. When it comes to telling my mom what great coffee is, we don't tell her very well.
And well, the thing that I'm at, in some ways, is that maybe they don't have to understand it, because maybe I think we've got to the point where like people will only enjoy good coffee if they understand coffee. If we educate them, then they will come.
Right.
And I kind of feel that's a problem, and that's not true, because I really, really enjoy many things in life. I enjoy cheese.
Right.
I like cheese. Let's go with cheese. I really like cheese.
I like cheese.
You love cheese. I don't think it's necessary that I know a great deal about cheese to enjoy cheese.
Right.
What will enable me to spend more is an experience where someone wants to talk to me,
right,
engage with me, entice me in, and then liberate money from my wallet. Like
I remember your Tampa Tantrum tour where you talked about the Malt Whisky Society.
Yeah, I know nothing about whiskey, but it's delicious. But I don't want to have to know. I don't want to have to know what's what and why, and I don't care. I can't care about everything.
Right.
I can't. So I'm going to select the things that I care about, and I care about wine, and I care about coffee, and I care about cooking, but I don't care about so many things.
Right.
And I don't care about shoes, and I don't care about raw denim, and I don't want to have to.
Right,
And I would like I'd like to find businesses that shortcut that for me, where I can say, hey, this is the money, get me to where I'm happy.
Right.
Like, you know this, I don't know this. I ride a bicycle. I don't want to be the guy that has to think about bicycles. I don't care about ratios and tire size. I don't care.
Right.
I want to ride a bike that I don't hate.
Right.
You know, and I want to find the people that will sell me a bike that I like, and I don't really want it to be awkward, and I don't want, bike shops aren't very good at this either. Like, I don't want to feel like an idiot buying a bicycle. I don't want to be laughed at, and bike shops are not good at this, in fairness. But like, wine shops are better, and I think cheese can be better, but let's not force education on people.
Yeah.
Let's talk to them. What are you in the mood for? All right, cool.
Right.
It doesn't, if you can say that wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you can just ask for whatever you like. Like,
And if the cheese geek comes in, that's great. Like,
Right.
geek out with him. Have a moment in the corner with him, and
Yeah.
tell him
I
all
think-
about it. But yeah,
And I think that's the built-in danger of speciality, specialists. And specialist shops have a tendency to be this way. When I was a kid, I grew up going to record stores a lot. I was really interested in record stores, but the record stores I went to, my brother couldn't go in because he felt judged the minute he walked in. If he wanted something that was popular, they would judge him immediately. Meanwhile, my brother's a surfer, and I enjoyed surfing, but I wasn't part of the culture. So for me, going into a surf shop is alienating. I feel judged. I feel like I'm going to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And I think that is the minefield of being focused and specialist, and being able to turn that around and be welcoming and safe.
it's kind of like I've got a 17-year-old son. You can say I don't look old enough to have a 17-year-old son now.
Yeah.
But I have a 17-year-old son, and kind of coffee's a teenager. His specialty coffee,
Right.
as we know it now, he's a teenager. And when he gets excited about something, he tells me everything about it.
Right.
I'm like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. And maybe we just need to grow up as an industry and kind of, become a little bit more mature about it and go, there you go. I love this. I hope you do too. And
Right.
step away. And that's really interesting.
Equally, I
like
think
that.
for the things that we are all interested in, unfortunately or not, we don't really go to shops for education on that anymore, because the internet's there.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like, the thing that you're a little bit geeky about, whatever it is, outside of coffee, you probably enjoy forums or follow some people on Twitter, or, do you know what I mean? There's access to information if you want it now, so if I'm reliant on a shop, well, that's unlikely to happen. Like, I'm just not going to use a shop that way. And I think if we build businesses to educate people in a retail environment, it's going to end up as a failed retail business because it's trying to do the wrong thing.
Right.
And there's a sort of shame in passionate people about the idea that a retail business should sell stuff for more than it paid for it.
Right,
Like, that's
right,
the basic
right,
premise.
right,
Like,
yeah.
we paid this much for it. We'd like to sell it to you for more.
Right.
So that we can have some money to do stuff with.
Yeah.
Like, that's it. And profits, horrible word,
Right,
which we
right.
can't really speak out loud. But we are idealists, and I think we sometimes forget that it's the wrong place for that.
For idealism.
Yeah, like, I have maybe 60 seconds with a customer in a busy coffee bar.
Right.
And that's a really, really, really poor place to perform any sort of adult education.
Right.
It's terrible.
Right.
It's an awful place, especially when they're pre-caffeine. So,
Right.
like, what are we really hoping to achieve? But we've gotten so obsessed with educating the consumer. And I think it's driven us to a very remote place,
Right.
away from our population. So,
Right. Well, and I think maybe one thing, as we talk about this, one thing I'm reflecting on is I think this is a really interesting idea about these, looking back through Europe or through London's coffee trends, and they were all sort of exotic in their nature. So in the 1600s, coffee was thought of as this Mediterranean or Arabic thing, and that's how the coffee shops, the first ones looked. They were like ornate and guys with turbans and stuff like that. And then in the 50s it was Italian, and it was part of an influx of Italian stuff, Vespas and Italian suits and black and white, movies and stuff. In some sense, when we were talking about the history of the WBC, there was this, Scandinavian espresso enthusiasm, coffee enthusiasm, and that maybe the London, this most recent London thing, there was an echo of that, you know? I think that's maybe fair to say. And it seems to me that perhaps now there's an Australian influence happening. There is, at least in the States. A lot of people are getting enthusiastic about, you know, Australian imports. But the thing that is, those seem like exotic, you know, there's Chinese food trends or Indian food trends or things like that. But the thing that's at the center of it is the social interaction. You know, that seems to always be, these are social movements and social interaction. And of course, that's something that can be achieved in 60 seconds.
Absolutely.
In the context of caffeine.
Yep.
If education cannot, is a safe, positive social interaction.
You can build relationships in 60 seconds.
Right.
You know what I mean? You can be welcomed into a space that begins to feel like yours in 60 seconds, and you can really enjoy the time you spend every day, every working day in a space. You know what I mean? There's plenty of time for that, and that to me is so much more valuable.
Right.
Because we've gone hard on quality, and we haven't gone hard on experience, despite the fact that if you stop anyone in the street and said, 2 cafes, one with spectacular coffee and terrible service, other one with okay coffee and amazing service, honestly, your money, your spare time, where are you going? We'd all be like, well, probably the service.
Yeah,
you know what
absolutely.
I mean? Like, we'd all just want to go where we're welcome and we enjoy to be.
Right.
We all feel this way, and yet, I could go down this track, like, can I derail myself right now?
Of course, yeah.
All right.
That's what we're here for.
So you're in a cafe.
I'm in a cafe.
And you're gonna buy a cup of coffee for yourself. And you are looking at a menu. There's 3 coffees on the menu. And say one's from Kenya, one is from El Salvador, and one is from Burundi. Okay.
Right.
And there's a short description underneath each coffee. And be honest. And this is specifically to you and who you are.
Okay.
Are the taste descriptors underneath the name of the coffee in any way going to influence the decision you make?
No.
No. You?
No.
No. Me? No.
But is that because we know?
Well, let's just go for a second. Like, so we and just about everyone I know in coffee wouldn't be like, rhubarb.
Yeah.
I'll try the Burundi. You
Right,
know what I mean?
right,
They wouldn't be like, oh,
right.
lemons. Let's go down Ethiopia. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's not going to happen. So we don't use aromatic descriptors to drive decisions.
Right.
And yet, none of us do, really, in coffee. And yet, knowing that we don't even use them ourselves, this is how we expect our customers to use them. This is how we sell the coffees that we roast.
Yeah.
Should there not be an element of cognitive dissonance there?
Yeah.
Is that not a little crazy?
It is. It's totally crazy.
But I guess the question is, how do they make a choice if they don't have that? I have over those 3. I'm going to have a preference towards the Kenyan because I really enjoy Kenyan coffees, and I know my experience of Kenyan coffees has been good. Yep. And if I know the shop or the roaster, I know that they're particularly good at that. So, but how do we do the guys that don't know, these ones that we don't want to educate? We don't want to. What do we say? Like,
well, I think we answer their questions if they have them.
Yeah.
But
you go into the bike shop and you ask them a question, they make you feel stupid. There's a danger of that.
That's the bit we have to be good at. We have to be, you have to look at every single customer that steps in front of you and say, what do you need right now?
Right.
If I can't spot someone looking at a menu with a frown and being a little hesitant, then I'm bad at my job.
Right.
If I'm at the point where I'm taking orders and if you're like, I can say, have you tried any coffees like this before? No. Do you want to try something unusual, or do you just want a really nice cup of coffee? And I can make a decision. And that way they can go through a simple yes-no binary and then make it a place where they're like, I didn't like this. And it'd be okay to be like, okay.
Totally safe, yeah.
Can I get you something else?
Yeah.
Do you know what? No, you've had enough coffee? Cool. We'll come back and see me tomorrow. I'll get you something else. You know what I mean?
Right.
Let's look after people.
Right.
It's very interesting what the guys at Handsome did, wasn't it? With the choice of their coffees. You can have something comfy, something crazy. Then that I guess that's just a different way of
let's
bringing people in.
Because the problem is, once I opt in based on the expectation of rose hip, then if I don't experience rosehip strongly, or maybe, I mean, God, how good is most people's ability to recall aromatic things? Like, you can probably have a pretty good idea of how rosehip tastes right now in your brain because you're a conscious taster.
Right.
But
that's a product of training and focus.
absolutely is. But most people, they're like, I don't know what
Rosehip.
rosehip is. It's
Right.
not. It doesn't taste like rosehip tea. I don't
Right.
think it tastes like coffee. So is this now a situation where it's the Emperor's New Clothes all over again? And
Right.
we are now increasingly replacing wine as the butt of the pretentious joke.
Yeah, that's right.
You know what I mean? Wine held that for a little while with,
Yeah.
wine snobs were very funny with the sniffing and the words.
Yeah.
And people have kind of accepted that wine is actually really interesting and good, and it's okay to like interesting wine. Let's laugh at the coffee people now. Let's make them the butt of the pretentious jokes.
Right. So
And,
I hear what you're saying, which is that the muscle we need to exercise is service and building experience, etc. How do we do that? How do we, as individuals, how do we practice that muscle?
I think it has to start with training, and it has to start with a kind of explicit stated goal that you start by training your staff with. And I'm about to find out how that's going to go. I spent a couple of weeks training some staff for a new project, and as much as we worked on let's mojo coffee and let's do refractometry and let's understand grind distribution profiles and let's pour pretty things in milk, really their job is to make sure that everyone who comes leaves happy.
Right.
And I don't really mind how they achieve that goal.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I believe the pricing should accommodate enough of what it needs to be, and you need to assess each customer as they come and see you and decide what you can do to improve their day. That's the stated goal. It's not to make the best cup of coffee, which is what we've generally told baristas to do, is make the best possible cup of coffee. And that's eyes down, fight the machine, fight the grinder.
Right.
If we said, your job is to make everyone's day a little bit better, I don't care how you do it. I trust you.
Yeah.
I've given you the resource, the information.
You've got all the tools you need, right?
Go and improve people's days.
Right.
Go and just improve them. Because I would like my day improved. I would like to visit a business that reliably improves my day.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I'm like, I'm gonna go and feel better. Like, you know what I mean? They'd be like, I've had a bad day. I want to go to the place that they're just nice to me.
Yeah.
They look after me, and they listen to me, and they talk to me, or they ignore me when I want to be ignored.
Well, that's a great place to end. You've improved our day, and we appreciate it. So thank you again to Mr. James Hoffmann, World Barista Champion of what year?
2007.
2007, joining
man.
us here for the World Barista Champion All-Stars. Stay tuned with us, stay with us, because in a few minutes we're going to have a challenge segment. And I believe you're competing, is that right?
I'm going to make some coffee.
That's
I
right.
remember
So
how.
it's at 12:30, I'm sorry. At 12:30, we'll be back here to have an espresso mystery box challenge, which will have two of our barista
So James
champions.
and Francesco Schnappo, competed. So you can have Italian barista champion and UK barista champion coffee, and choose your favorite.
Who will win?
All right.
Cool.
Thank you. Join us at 1:30 or 12:30. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.